name is Leah, and this story starts with the sound of a fist hitting a door. It wasn't the wind. Here in Norman, Oklahoma, you learn the difference between the sounds a storm makes and the sounds a man makes. The rain was coming down in sheets, that thick, heavy kind of rain that drowns out the world. I was in my studio, surrounded by the quiet hum of my editing bay and the glow of weather maps on 6 different screens. This was my sanctuary, my command center. No one ever came here unannounced, especially not at 10 p.m. in the middle of a thunderstorm. But the knocking came again, frantic and desperate. I killed the lights, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole, and my world stopped. It was my father, Preston, not the composed, Armani-clad real estate titan from Boston, but a ghost. Soaked to the bone, his silver hair plastered to his skull, his face pale and hollowed out in the strobe of the lightning. I unlocked the door, and he practically fell inside, dripping water all over the concrete floor. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before, eyes stripped of all pride. His voice was a raw whisper, barely audible over the storm. "Leah," he breathed, "I need your help. Your sister, Morgan, and we need $2 million. By Friday, or everything is gone." If you've ever had a moment that felt like the floor just dropped out from under you, if you know that stomach-lurching feeling of reality completely shifting in an instant, just tap that like button so I know I'm not alone in this journey. $2 million. The number just hung in the air between us, thicker than the humid, storm-filled night. It was an impossible sum, delivered by a man who looked like a stranger. And to understand the silence that followed, to understand why my first instinct wasn't compassion, but a cold, heavy stillness, you have to travel back with me. Go back 10 years to a mahogany dinner table in a perfectly preserved brownstone on Beacon Hill, Boston. The room was flawless, suffocatingly so. Crystal glasses gleamed, silverware was aligned with military precision, and my mother, Charlotte, oversaw it all with a tense, practiced smile. I was 18, and my heart was soaring. I'd just been accepted into the University of Oklahoma's Advanced Meteorology program, a top-tier school for chasing the very storms I loved. I thought they'd be proud. I remember the words bubbling out of me, full of hope. My father, Preston, didn't even look up from his steak. He took a slow sip of wine, dabbed his lips with a linen napkin, and then looked at me, not with pride, but with a tired disdain. "Chasing clouds, Leah," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "That isn't a career. It's a death wish with a diploma." He then turned to my sister, Morgan, who was basking in the glow of his approval. "Now, Morgan," he boomed, his whole demeanor changing. "Her startup just secured $5 million in Series A funding from a top Palo Alto firm. That, my dear, is a future." Morgan gave me a tiny, pitying smirk. That smirk was the real wound. I'm curious, whatever time it is where you're watching this, have you ever felt that? That sting of having your passion dismissed by the very people you want to celebrate with? If you have, just type the word dreamer in the comments so we know we're in this together. That night, something inside me broke free. His dismissal wasn't a rejection, it was a release. I didn't need their permission anymore. 2 months later, I packed everything I owned into my beat-up Toyota Corolla. I remember driving across the Charles River, watching the Boston skyline shrink in my rearview mirror until it was just a memory. I was trading manicured hedges and cold brownstones for an endless open sky. I was terrified, and I had never felt more alive. My new life was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a tiny second-floor apartment that always smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and the barbecue joint next door. It was a world away from Beacon Hill. My days became a blur of survival. By night, I was a waitress at a 24-hour diner, slinging coffee and hash browns to truckers on the graveyard shift. My hands constantly smelled of grease and burnt coffee. By day, I was an unpaid intern at a local news station, doing anything they'd let me just to be near a Doppler radar. Every spare dollar, every ounce of energy went into the chase. My first storm-chasing vehicle was that same old Corolla, rattling with every gust of wind. I'd drive for hours, fueled by cheap gas station coffee and pure adrenaline, just to sit on a dirt road and watch a supercell thunderstorm bloom on the horizon. Out there, under that vast, violent sky, I felt insignificant in the best possible way. I wasn't Preston's disappointing daughter or Morgan's weird sister. I was just a girl with a camera, witnessing the raw, terrifying power of the planet. It was a brutal, exhausting, and lonely existence. And it was the first time I truly felt like I was home. For 2 years, it was just me against the sky. I was getting better, but I was reckless, making dangerous mistakes because I had no one to guide me. Then, on a sweltering afternoon on a dusty service road just west of Wichita, Kansas, I met Cole. He was everything I wasn't, a seasoned veteran with a truck that looked like a tank, bristling with antennas and professional-grade equipment. He looked me and my rusty Toyota up and down with a skeptical eye, then completely ignored me. We were tracking the same system, a volatile supercell that was pulsing with potential. He was about to give up on it, call it a bust. But I saw something on my laptop screen, a subtle hook echo, a classic sign of rotation that the broader models hadn't picked up yet. My hands were shaking, but I got out of my car and walked over. "Excuse me," I said, my voice feeling small. "I think it's about to turn." He scoffed, but something made him look at his own instruments again. His eyes widened slightly. He didn't say thank you. He just grunted, "Kid's got an eye." That one gruff sentence from a complete stranger felt like the first breath of fresh air after years of drowning. It makes you think, doesn't it? Have you ever had someone in your life, a teacher, a friend, a mentor, who believed in you when no one else would? If you have a Cole in your story, take a second to honor them. Just type a heart emoji in the comments for that person who saw your potential. He let me follow him that day. Under his watchful eye, I filmed my first major tornado, an EF4 monster carving a path across an empty field. It was terrifying, majestic, and beautiful. That footage went viral, and for the first time, my passion didn't just feel like a calling, it felt like a beginning. That one viral video changed everything. Suddenly, I wasn't just some reckless girl with a camera. I was a documentarian. My channel, Tempest Eye, gained a following. Small brands started sponsoring my equipment. News outlets paid for my footage. And then came Sundance, my short film, a visceral 10-minute piece about the life cycle of a single supercell, was accepted into the documentary shorts category in Park City, Utah. I felt like I was dreaming. I walked the snowy streets of Park City in a daze, surrounded by the very filmmakers I had idolized for years. I bought a simple, elegant dress, the most expensive piece of clothing I'd ever owned, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged. The awards ceremony was a blur of bright lights and hushed anticipation. When they called my name for Best Short Documentary, I thought I had misheard. I remember floating to the stage, my hands trembling as I accepted the heavy bronze award. All I could think about was my family. This was it. This was the proof. This was something tangible, something prestigious, something they had to understand. Backstage, still buzzing with adrenaline, I pulled out my phone and called home. My heart was pounding with a childish, hopeful excitement. Dad, Mom, I won, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. I won at Sundance. There was a pause. Then I heard Preston's voice, flat and unimpressed. An award? That's nice, dear, he said, the sound of clinking ice in his glass audible over the line. Tell me, when are you going to stop playing with death and get a real job inside a building with 4 solid walls? Before I could even process the blow, my phone buzzed with a text from Morgan. It was a picture of her on a yacht in San Francisco, champagne in hand. The caption read, "Congrats, little sis. Let me know when you're done with your hobby. I might have a marketing gig for you." I stood there in my beautiful dress, holding my golden trophy, and I had never felt so utterly and completely alone. After Sundance, I threw myself back into my work. The pain of that phone call became a silent driving force. I upgraded my gear, built a small team, and my channel grew beyond anything I could have imagined. I didn't speak to my family for 6 months. Then, an email from my mother, Charlotte, arrived. The subject line was simply, "Family Announcement." It was a summons to their lake house on Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire. My gut told me not to go, but a small, foolish part of me still hoped. The house was beautiful, a sprawling cedar and glass mansion perched on the water's edge, but inside, the air was cold. Preston stood by the massive stone fireplace, holding court. Morgan was there, radiating an almost blinding aura of self-satisfaction. The announcement came after a tense, silent dinner. Preston gathered us in the living room, a ledger book open on the coffee table. He explained, in cold, clinical terms, that he was restructuring the family's assets. He was liquidating several properties and funds, including the educational trust my grandmother had left specifically for me to create a new 8-figure investment pool. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. "This entire fund," Preston declared, looking directly at my sister, "will be backing Morgan's new AI development venture. We are going all in on a real future." It was a public coronation and a silent execution. My own future, the one my grandmother had provided for, was being erased to fuel my sister's ambition. I numbly reached into my bag and placed my Sundance trophy on the table between us, a desperate, silent plea to be seen. Preston looked at the bronze statue with utter contempt. He didn't even touch it. He just said, "This family's legacy is built on tangible success, Leah, not on glorified home movies of bad weather. Your path has no place in it." He was writing my living will, and I had no say. I stood up, left the trophy on the table, and walked out without another word. This time, I knew it was for good. And so, for 3 years, I built my own world. My company thrived, my work won other awards, and I found a sense of peace I never thought possible. The silence from my family was a blessing, and that brings us back to where we started. Back to the drenched floor of my Oklahoma studio, the storm raging outside, and my father, a ghost from a life I had left behind, uttering that impossible number. $2 million. A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. 2 million? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Is that what Morgan's real future costs to bail out? The future you funded with my inheritance? The look on his face was the beginning of the truth. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, crumbling shame. He finally confessed. The Preston real estate empire, the bedrock of our family's identity, was a lie. A house of cards built on risky loans and fraudulent investor reports. A Ponzi scheme. Morgan's AI venture wasn't a brilliant next chapter. It was a desperate last-ditch Hail Mary to generate enough cash to cover the gaping holes. And it had failed, spectacularly. But it was worse than that. This wasn't just about bankruptcy. The SEC was involved. Criminal charges were on the table. The $2 million wasn't to save a company. It was for bail. It was to hire a team of lawyers to try and keep him and the golden child, Morgan, from going to federal prison. He wasn't just asking for my money. He was asking me to pay for the consequences of their greed, the very greed that had cast me out. And this is where the story turns. And I have to ask you to put yourself in my shoes for a second. What do you do? In the comments below, just type one word, help or leave. I truly need to know what you were thinking in this exact moment. I said no. I looked at the man who had authored my deepest wounds, and for the first time, I felt nothing but a quiet, resolute finality. I told him the bank of Leah was closed. The silence that followed was heavier than any storm I had ever chased. He left without another word, swallowed by the rain, and I locked the door behind him, believing it was over. For 3 days, a strange peace settled over me. It was the peace of a battle finally finished, the quiet exhaustion of a survivor. I was wrong. The real storm was just beginning. It started not with a bang, but with a buzz. Then another. My phone began to vibrate uncontrollably on my desk. Emails flooded my inbox with subject lines like, regarding recent events, and urgent, your public image. My social media comments sections, usually filled with aspiring photographers and weather enthusiasts, turned into a cesspool of hate. I was confused, completely blindsided, until my assistant sent me the link. Morgan hadn't just posted a sad story on her Facebook page. She had executed a professional, calculated media assault. Using her Silicon Valley connections, she had published a beautifully written, utterly devastating, open letter on a major tech blog, the kind that industry leaders read over their morning coffee. She painted a masterpiece of manipulation. She was the brilliant, heartbroken daughter whose only mistake was trusting the wrong people. I was the cold, vengeful sister, a disaster vulture who profited from tragedy but turned her back on her own family's crisis. She included carefully cropped childhood photos where she looked angelic, and I looked sullen, and snippets of old emails taken completely out of context. She wasn't just telling her side of the story. She was expertly crafting a new reality, and the internet, starved for drama, was eating it up. The first 24 hours were a freefall. I watched years of hard work, my reputation, my entire business begin to unravel because of a story that was a complete fabrication. My top sponsor, a major camera brand, emailed to indefinitely pause our collaboration due to the reputational risk. The comments on my videos became a war zone. I felt helpless, like I was trying to scream the truth in a vacuum. My first instinct was to hide, to shut down all my accounts and disappear into the plains until the digital storm passed. I spent that night in my dark room, the only place that felt real. Surrounded by the smell of developer and fixer, under the safe red glow, I watched an image slowly emerge on a piece of photographic paper. It was a photo I'd taken weeks earlier, an old, weathered barn standing defiant against a massive, swirling storm front. The barn was scarred and beaten, but it was still standing. And as I watched the truth of that image appear from a blank white sheet, something inside me shifted. Morgan had used a story, a masterfully crafted lie, as her weapon. She thought she could erase my reality and write her own. But storytelling was my weapon, too. The difference was, my stories were true. I wasn't going to write a rebuttal. I wasn't going to engage in a mudslinging contest on social media. I was going to do what I do best. I was going to show them. That night, I decided I would make one more film, my most personal one yet. It wouldn't be about a tornado in Kansas. It would be about the storm in my own life. I would call it the eye of the storm. And this is the choice we all have to make when we're backed into a corner. Do we let the lies suffocate us, or do we arm ourselves with the truth? If you believe in fighting back, not with anger, but with absolute, undeniable truth, I need you to write "Truth wins" in the comments below. I need to feel that strength with me. I didn't sleep for the next 7 days. My studio became a fortress of purpose. Fueled by black coffee and a righteous cold fury, I sifted through a decade of memories, a decade of digital evidence. I pulled the audio from the raw file of my Sundance Awards call, capturing the devastating flatness in my father's voice. I screen captured Morgan's text message about her marketing gig. I found the financial statements from the family trust that had been drained to zero. And finally, the ace up my sleeve. The high-resolution security camera footage from my own studio, which had clearly recorded my father's desperate, rain-soaked confession. I edited it all together without sensationalism. There was no angry voiceover, no dramatic music. I simply laid the evidence out, piece by piece, chronologically, letting the facts speak for themselves. The final film was 15 minutes of raw, undeniable truth. Hitting the publish button on YouTube was the single most terrifying moment of my life. I was laying my entire soul bare for the world to either accept or destroy. As soon as it was live, I shut down my computer, left my phone on the counter, and just drove. I drove for hours into the plains of western Kansas, needing the sky to feel big and my problems to feel small. When I returned the next day, my hands were shaking as I logged back on. I was expecting a battlefield. What I found was a revolution. The video had over 20 million views. The comments section, once filled with hate, was now a tidal wave of support. Team Leah was trending worldwide. Major news outlets from New York to Los Angeles had picked up the story, framing it as a masterclass in fighting digital defamation. The tech blog that had published Morgan's letter had issued a full retraction and a public apology to me. Her remaining business partners had publicly dissolved their relationship with her company. The court of public opinion had delivered its verdict. It was a complete and total vindication. There was no joy in it, no triumphant celebration, just the quiet, heavy relief of the truth finally seeing the light of day. In the weeks that followed, the digital storm moved on as all storms do. The world found new dramas, new heroes, new villains. My sponsors returned, my channel's growth stabilized, and a quiet normality began to settle back into my life. I thought the war was over. I thought I had finally earned my peace. Then, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived by courier. It wasn't a letter from my mother. It was from a high-powered public relations firm in Chicago with a letterhead bearing her name, the office of Charlotte Preston. My blood ran cold. This wasn't about family. This was about brand management. The letter was a masterpiece of corporate apology filled with words like reconciliation, healing, and moving forward as a united front. It proposed a multi-step plan. First, a private, mediated therapy session. Second, a carefully orchestrated reunion photo shoot for a major magazine, showcasing our family's resilience. The final step was a proposal for me to make a substantial, 7-figure donation to a new charitable foundation being established in my mother's name, an act that would, in their words, publicly signify our collective commitment to a positive future. I read it twice, just to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. They weren't apologizing. They were trying to hire me to fix their reputation. They saw my hard-won peace and my success not as something to respect, but as a resource to be leveraged, a stain remover for their public image. The old me might have cried. The old me might have seen a twisted glimmer of hope. But the woman holding that letter just felt a profound, unshakable calm. I walked over to my laptop, opened a new email addressed to the PR firm, and typed 10 simple words. My story is not for sale, and my peace is not for your performance. I hit send. It was the last time I ever communicated with any of them. The final door had closed, and this time, I was the one holding the key. So, that brings us to now. It's been 2 years since that last email. I'm standing on a quiet hilltop in Wyoming, watching the sun set behind the Teton Mountains. There's a storm building in the distance, miles away, and its silent flashes of lightning are beautiful. I spent the first half of my life chasing storms, running toward the chaos because I thought that's where power was. But I learned that there are 2 kinds of storms. There are the ones made of wind and rain, which are honest in their power. And then there are the ones made of people, born from manipulation and ego. You don't chase those storms. You don't try to reason with them or hope they'll change course. You build a shelter. That's the lesson I wanted to share with you today. Your shelter is built with bricks of boundaries, cemented with the mortar of self-respect. Its foundation is your non-negotiable value as a human being, and its roof is the peace you fiercely protect. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is not to weather the storm, but to have the wisdom to walk inside, lock the door, and let it rage on without you. It is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of survival. You are not a bad son or a bad daughter for saying no. You are not a villain for choosing your peace over their pain. You are simply a survivor who has finally decided to stop bleeding for people who would never offer you a bandage. And if this story, this long and difficult journey has meant anything to you, if you believe in the right to build your own shelter and live by your own truth, then I'm asking you to join this community. Hit that subscribe button, not just for more videos, but to stand with a community of people who know that sometimes the most powerful story you can ever tell is the one where you finally get to write your own peaceful ending.